conservatives will not stop going after the Affordable Care Act. And in the Braidwood case, the plaintiffs are harboring so-called religious objections to purchasing health insurance that includes some of the recommended preventive services. What are these preventive services, you ask? They include, but are not limited to, quote, abortifacient contraception, PrEP, i.e. pre-exposure prophylaxis, to prevent HIV transmission, the HPV vaccine, and screenings and behavioral counseling for sexually transmitted disease and drug use. They believe that these interventions, quote, encourage homosexual behavior, intravenous drug use, and sexual activity outside of marriage between one man and one woman. Well, you know what? Screw y'all. You don't need to be in a homosexual relationship, nor do you need to be in any sort of, extramarital sexual situation to need, for example, PrEP. You can get PrEP if you have exposure to HIV, if you're working in a hospital. And while working in a hospital, you get a needle stick that happened to stick somebody who may be infected with HIV. Now, I don't care who gets PrEP. I have no problem with individuals who are in homosexual relationships. I have no problem with people who are having sex outside of marriage. It's none of my business. It's none of their business either. None. But the fact that they're making that into a gay thing is absurd, because one of the first times I ever heard about these PrEP, the pre-exposure prophylaxis shots that you can get, was when I was working in a hospital. And there was somebody in the hospital who needed to get one of these shots because they needed to make sure that they didn't inadvertently get HIV, and you can prevent it if you take this medicine. You can prevent the HIV from taking hold if you get this. Yes, there are people who use PrEP who are in homosexual relationships, but that shouldn't matter. Then, of course, there's the whole abortifacient contraception. There's no evidence whatsoever that birth control pills or the morning after pill are abortifacients. None. It used to be the idea, we used to believe, science used to believe, that if you took a birth control pill or the morning after pill, that what could happen is either it prevents ovulation, fertilization, or implantation. It has been since shown that there is no evidence that birth control pills prevent implantation. None. There's no evidence of that happening. Some of the warning labels might still include it based off the old language, but newer studies have shown that no evidence exists that it prevents implantation. But are you even pregnant if you hasn't been implanted yet? So that shouldn't even matter. But I do understand the argument made by these hyper-religious evangelical type folks who believe that an embryo is the same thing as a baby, and as such they're opposed to anything that might stop implantation of an already fertilized egg. But again, there's no evidence that it happens. But this is the same bogus crap that was done in Burrell versus Hobby Lobby in one of Justice Alito's terrible rulings, that they allowed Hobby Lobby to say, we believe that it causes an abortion. We believe that it prevents a fertilized egg from implanting into the uterine wall. And as such, their belief was enough to bring the suit. Instead of the court, what they should have done, the court should have said, okay, if this actually happens, then maybe you have a case. But the onus should be on you to prove the science that it happens before actually being able to make the argument that therefore you should not be forced to cover it. But that's not what Alito and this activist conservative Supreme Court did. Nothing. They didn't do anything of the sort. And all these other things like intravenous drug, again, it should be none of their business if something is helping somebody who might happen to be on drugs. Let's say a family member is dealing with a drug issue. Don't you want to stop it? Don't you want to help them? No, their solution is to throw everything out with the bathwater. Their solution is to punish people because they participate in activities that they don't agree with. These so-called religious people, again, want to let people die of HIV because they don't want to cover PrEP. And that's one of those things that will be marked as, their lawsuit doesn't say this, so therefore we're fact-checking you because their lawsuit never said that we want people with HIV to die. But guess what? That's going to happen because more people are going to get it, and as such, more people will die because of it. That's why the fact-checkers are stupid. That's one of the reasons why this is also stupid. The court should not allow people to be able to enforce their religious beliefs on others through the courts. It is not a violation of your religious rights, your religious freedoms, when somebody works, when they use their benefits to get their needed medicine, their needed treatments. Period. End of story. Why? Because I've made this argument on the podcast before. If I work and I earn $1 at that work, I can spend that dollar anywhere I want, on anything. The same should be considered for any benefit earned from that work. I pay for those benefits with my work. You pay for my labor, and then I'm paying for the benefits with that labor. And a benefit dollar spent should not be considered any different than a dollar spent out of my wallet, than a dollar spent out of my bank account, or a dollar spent of anything else. You should not get to force that on other people because you happen to not like what it is. But what this case also risks, potentially, it opens the door for the Supreme Court to be able to come in and say, not only are these things not required to be covered by insurers if they have religious objections, it could toss out the entire portion of the fact that, these people get preventive service coverage. It could completely throw out the coverage of things at 100% first dollar. Preventive coverage, required preventive coverage is one of the good things about the Affordable Care Act. There are bad things, sure. There are things that could be improved, sure. They want to throw out the good things. But you know what? Who's going to defend this now? The Trump administration? Will the Trump administration defend the Affordable Care Act against these lawsuits? Because it was allowed late enough so that the Justice Department will not be able to continue to defend it. At least the Biden Justice Department wouldn't. It's the Trump Justice Department that's going to defend it. Do we believe that the Trump Justice Department is going to say, oh, we're going to defend the requirement to have abortifacient coverage or whatever it is they want to call it, even though it's not abortifacient coverage. It's just birth control pills. No. They're not going to put up any sort of meaningful defense. They'll allow the Supreme Court to rule how they want the Supreme Court to rule. And if they throw up a defense just to make sure it goes to the Supreme Court, that'll be a bad one. And then, at the very minimum, these services and other services like this, if people can claim a moral objection, it'll basically say, I don't believe in covering any of this, so I don't want to cover any of this. I'm morally opposed to any of this preventive care. But it could just eliminate the ability altogether, or the requirement altogether to have preventive care. That's the worst case scenario. Well, the worst case scenario is they just toss the Affordable Care Act altogether. Because you have the 5 votes to do it, because Justice Roberts won't, but everyone else who is conservatives on the court would. But the worst case would be you lose all preventive coverage, covered at 100% first dollar. And then more people will get sick. And then more people will die. Sorry, Facebook fact checkers or people that used to fact check on Facebook. That is the logical conclusion based off of what will happen if these people are allowed to have these things go through. And they're using religion to deny people the health care that they need. And I hope if this thing happens, and if these things are no longer covered, after these people left around, I hope they're the first ones to find out. I hope something happens to them that causes them to need one of these solutions that they've conveniently have thrown out. We know it's going to happen to good people. We know that good people are going to suffer because of this BS. But I sure as hell hope the first people that it happens to are the ones that voted for Donald Trump, who thought that Biden wasn't intelligent enough or didn't have the cognitive abilities despite Mr. President Hamburger. I think today was the anniversary of hamburgers. Covfefe. United States. All the other things that Donald Trump has said and done that prove his cognitive disabilities. Oh, he said person, woman, man, camera, TV. He must be cognitively intelligent or whatever. Yeah, F you. But these people, I hope they get their comeuppance. I hope that anything that they cause to get thrown out and harm they do to the people, I hope it impacts them. And I hope they learn. Not just the people pushing for this, but for the people who put the marginalized and oppressed people and other people who are put at risk by a Donald Trump presidency. I hope those people who should absolutely be voting for progressives, for liberals, for leftists, I hope those people get the brunt of the harm that is coming. Because they're the ones that deserve it. Because they're the ones who enabled it to happen in the first place. Fool me once, shame on you. Fool me twice, shame on me. Well, they got fooled again. And guess what? Shame on them. And shame on them for all the harm that is coming in the next 4 years. What do you think? Agree, disagree? Leave your comments down below. Remember to like the video, subscribe to the channel, share it with your friends, but not on Facebook until they actually get rid of the fact-checking thing, because I've made some claims that, are just logical conclusions off of what happens, and that's not okay, according to the previous fact-checkers. But anyway.